The winner of the Norm Smith Medal in today's match is James Hird of Essendon.
Essendon winning their first flag since 1965.
There's the siren sound to win the game, and Essendon the premiers for 1985, winning 2 in a row.
Away goes Michael Long. Oh, what play! It may have been touched on the line. No! Zaharakis has kicked a goal. The Bombers are in front of the G.
To Watson, who emerges with the football. Some icing on the cake. Oh, what a finish!
Ultimately, we come with this concept, a podcast, that's all about trying to provide a greater connection from the fans to the club and the clubs to the club to the fans during what's a really challenging period for a lot of people. So it's in part how can we help, and in part hopefully bringing people out of what is their current reality into an opportunity to connect with the club and have a laugh and have a smile.
Bringing the Essendon community together and hopefully sharing some stories, but also some goodwill. We've got some programs lined up somewhere during the show where allowing Essendon supporters to help those in need or help other Essendon supporters and really bring that community together while also having a bit of a laugh.
Well, I'm looking at this rundown sheet and it says the final episode, episode 10 of Working Through It, the Essendon Football Club podcast to get everyone, not just Essendon fans, not just football fans, but everybody through what's been an extraordinary period of life for communities all around the world, but particularly for the Essendon community. We've tried to distract you over the last 10 weeks, and we'll try and do it again today. My name's Adam White, but it's all about James Hird, Xavier Campbell and Jobe Watson, who have given their time for all the Essendon fans out there over the last 10 weeks. And it's a bit weird today because usually I just sit here and just say hello and it sort of just goes across to the guys. They're all in their houses, or Xavier's sometimes in his office. They're all in the studio with me here, so it's all a bit weird. We're live on television. I don't really sure how this whole show's going to happen, but we're just going to have a bit of fun and reflect back on what's been the last 10 weeks, but also a bit of a preview for the season proper as well, with the Bombers taking on Sydney on Sunday at the SCG. We'll take plenty of text messages. We'll try and chat to as many fans as we can, and just reflect back on the last 10 weeks. I said welcome to Xavier Campbell 10 weeks ago and asked him what the podcast was going to be. You heard from him in the opener there. Xavier, how proud are you of what has been achieved over the last 10 weeks?
Yeah, thanks, Whiting. It's good to be here this afternoon. It's good to get everyone in the same room. Really proud. I mean, it sort of was when we first had those discussions of what the podcast might be or what the concept was and how we might bring it to life. It was difficult to work out where it might go, but to think we're sort of 10 weeks on now, it's become a bit of a staple, and each week for Essendon fans, it's certainly helped build that connection with the club. In a time when connection wasn't there with the season being impacted in the way that it was. So, judging by the feedback we receive all the time when you're talking to fans, it's been really positive. So, I want to thank the boys for buying into it and everything that they've done, because it's been excellent from the club's perspective. I think it's been great from the fans as well, and fans have really engaged with the show every week.
I remember when I was told that we were going to do it, and Dave Barham, who's sort of behind the scenes with this show, he said, we're going to get James Hird to be part of this podcast. Confess, I did say, please, I don't think you're going to get James Hird to be part of this podcast. He said, no, he wants to do it. And sure enough, he's done all 10 episodes and he's with us in the studio. Hirdy, what have you got out of this experience?
Look, I think it's been great to reconnect with Essendon supporters, and I think the lockdown period, as beneficial as it's been for the Victorian community in terms of health-wise, has been very difficult for all of us. You're at home, you can't get out, and so hopefully this for the Essendon supporters has been helpful. But even for ourselves, I think just to have an hour and a half a week doing something a bit different you wouldn't normally do has been interesting. But what I'm really looking forward to is the best of show. They say that Faulty Towers went for 10 or 11 weeks. They've played it for the last 30 years. Jobe and I are expecting that RSN is going to be playing this on a regular repeat basis over the next 25 years.
Imagine the royalties that everyone's going to get for the next 25
it'll
years.
be at least triple what we're getting paid now. Right?
And Joe Watson rounds out the trio. Jobe, we think about what we were thinking and talking about 10 weeks ago to where we are now that footy's back. Did you think it would be back as quickly as we were?
I thought it was probably ambitious early in March when you were reading, what the numbers were doing globally and what the expectations were here. I think that everyone thought that, how deep is the rabbit hole that we're going to be going down. Knew where we were going to be ending up, and football and sport in general felt like just a completely a bridge too far away because there was such fear in the community and fear about people's lives and livelihoods. So sport definitely took a back step, but I think that as society and the community as a whole has been able to implement the need and the social distancing and what that's done to being able to flatten the curve and being able to slowly reopen the country has been obviously it's taken an enormous amount of goodwill amongst the collective to be able to achieve it, and now the benefit of that is one that we haven't had obviously the loss of life that we were expecting, but also sport is now able to return, and I think who are heavily invested in the game, it's great to see that it's coming on and that people can come back and watch the sport, and hopefully, in the not too distant future, go back and actually be at the games, which would be fantastic. Yeah,
and that seems to be getting better and better all the time. Now, what usually happens here is that I just leave it to you to then sort of host the show from here. Don't worry about me just sitting right next to you. Just go for you as the show progresses, is sort of reflect back on all the interviews we did throughout the course of this 10 weeks, and we'll get to as many text messages as we can. We won't just do it at the end. We'll try and feed them through as we go. But Jobe, go for it. It's all yours.
Well, I think that what I would like to like a preview of where the season's going to go now. I think that we're all excited about the season starting and the expectations. We've touched on it as we've spoken to different players and people associated with the club. But I guess your opinion, Hurdy, on what your expectations are for the team this year, where you think the strengths of the side are, where the weaknesses are, what you would love to see to show you that the team's really progressing.
Yeah, I'd be interested to read in the paper and get you guys to comment over the last couple of days people's predictions about where Essendon are going to finish. And coming into the season, everyone's sort of Essendon's around the top 8, and we beat Fremantle. But in the last 10 weeks, we've got worse because not one, I think, pundit has put us in their final 8. So that feels harsh to me. I think that it's very hard to go backwards, and particularly looking at the injury list, I think that Fantasia's going to be out, and also Joey. But other than that, it looks to be a pretty complete list, and I think that's been one of the issues for Essendon over the last 5 or 6 years, is having a full list to pick from. But with a strong midfield, even stronger, with Smith coming into the team from last year being injured and spending some time in the forward line, I think we're very bottom part of the 8, and then you play from there. So look, your start will be the most important thing. I mean, you've got to get wins on the board early with a shortened season because there will be injuries. Every club is going to have injuries, but if you can get off to a good start, I think you're in with a chance. I can't see why we've gone backwards as far as everyone thinks we have over the last 10 weeks.
Do you think that the quality of the game, I think we all expect it to be a bit rough early and scratchy as the early parts of the season often are, but do you think the actual product might be superior by the time we're sort of in that third or last third of the season? We've got players who are more rested. There's not as many there's no games in the VFL, so players aren't sort of getting injured and hurt in the VFL. There's going to be higher competition for spots. The games are shorter, and there's less of them in July and August. Do you think that actually goes away and it just becomes a higher quality season right to the end? Yeah,
I think you're right, and I think also one of the things, I expect this round to be like a finals round. I mean, you can the pent up anxiety and tension, and then everyone knows to get off to a good start, and also, as you would know, Joe, and also Xavier, the star in the sample you were, obviously, that basically that first 5 or 6 rounds, the last 10 minutes of each quarter when you first start is a real struggle, right?
Yeah.
That's where the skill errors come. That's just not going to be there this year in terms of those first 4 or 5 rounds. So I'm expecting there will be mistakes for the first 2 or 3 rounds, but the intensity, I think, is really going to lift in this round, because the players want to play, and it's great to see the players playing for the right reasons. So I think you'll see a better quality. I think you'll be more intense, more pressure, and the games will go right down to the wire because of the shortened quarters.
And do you think that what expectations from this list, and this team who've with his and Blake has come in with their game plan and what that they were trying to implement. They've had that missed period of time, but obviously talking to the players, they were really excited about what the development had looked like over that November, December, January, February period. How long do you think it will be before they start to pick up that level? Pressure comes and there's actual fatigue and things like that. Do you think we will see straight away a different style of Essendon game?
I think so. I think it'll be a better style. Rightly or wrongly, there was criticism about our style the last 2 or 3 years. And if you sort of listen to what's being said, you listen to the players talk, and you watch round one, a much more defensive, cohesive, team-based defence is implemented, and they've got a better team defence. You give yourself a really good chance of being a good side. So I think everything that has been talked about, and I also think that, just knowing that there have been some teaching sessions going on, not on the field, but in, video conferencing the players and, in team-based thing and that sort of stuff. So yes, it might take a little bit of time to adapt, but I think our game style will be vastly improved on last year, particularly from that defensive point of view. And Xavier, you've probably been at some trainings or looked over the fence or looked out from your office and seen them working on it. I imagine they've been working on it pretty hard over the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'm not sure it really hurts us to have that break either. Like, to your point, the education piece has been a big part of the focus across the pre-season, and even just to get that one game out, and obviously we got the win, which was important. I think we played better than what the result probably indicated. We just fell away late, but you could see that marked difference in their game plan, particularly on how we moved the ball forward into the program. Year with Blake coming to the program, it's been about not just attack but building the connection between defence and attack, and you started to see some of those aspects that were sort of shining through. And then you get that break. I think it's an opportunity for players to reset. Is it ideal? It's not ideal, but in the context of where we're at, I don't think it hurts us. And it gives them an opportunity, another 3 weeks now, to build into it. Everything's compromised, like everything's just different, but everyone's in the same position. So I don't sort of buy into it being now than it than any other year in the context of how many games there are. So I'm actually really excited about the year. I feel positive about the year. To your point before about where do the experts see us, it sort of doesn't really bother me what they think. I'm surprised to read it. The fact that only one thought we were sort of a top 8 team, was surprised, but I don't mind us going in with a lower expectation from the outside looking in than we've had in the past, because I think there's a disproportionate build on some of the bigger teams. They either pump you up higher than perhaps you should be, or bring you down confident about the path that we're on.
And you've got Heppel coming back this week, which he probably wouldn't have played the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season anyway. And look, one player doesn't make your team or break your team, but inspirational leader, obviously extremely good player in your midfield. And I think the injury to Tip and Woody on the weekend in that practice game, whatever it was, if he can get up as well, it's vital, because Sydney aren't flying. They're not the best team in the competition. You've got Carlton the week after, and then
Melbourne into Collingwood.
And Melbourne into Collingwood. So you look at those first 3 games, you come out of that hopefully 0-4, and you're in with a red hot chance to get that top 8. So I think it's looking positive, but you go to Sydney and you cop a hiding, it all changes too, and you get 3 or 4 injuries. I think the season will be on the balance over the injuries and the performances you get early in the year, because injuries lead to injuries. You get 2 or 3 injuries to key players, you've got to throw your team around, more injuries, and that can be a massive hurdle for the team.
Also, Hurdy, the other part that I think is really interesting is how do you get off to a fast start? Like how do you get off to a fast start in games? Because I think that there'll be definitely a trend for the teams that 3 goals up in the first quarter might seem recoverable, but when you shorten the game by 20% and scoring becomes harder, all of a sudden the 3-goal advantage in the first quarter becomes an insurmountable lead to peg back by the time the game finishes. So from a coach's perspective, how do you sort of try and focus the team? I mean, you used to tell to me all the time, just kick it as soon as you get it at the start of games, and I used to ignore you, but
it wasn't the only thing.
How do you sort of, from a coaching sense, how do you emphasise how important starts are now? Because not only do we talk about it every time we play, but it's more relevant now than what it has been in previous years.
Yeah, I think one of it is having your best players around the ball and around those contests as often as possible, because you know you can have them there more because the game doesn't go as long. I mean, what you would have rotated probably 3 times a quarter, so to speak. So in this instance, you probably would have only rotated twice a quarter, maybe a bit up forward. So you have your best players and you have your best combinations, and often in the rotation, often in the course of a quarter or a particular half, you can lose touch with which players are around the ball, and you can suddenly look at your centre square or your players are closer to the ball, and you go, gee, you've got 3 inexperienced players and only 3 senior players, and that way I think you can really control that. So that's one of the things I would try and do, and you'll probably see players a little play out, but you might see players, your lesser players, spending a bit more time on the bench, because you can just get the rest you need into your players. But also you need your players at the start of the quarter to focus on getting in the contest, outnumbering and doing all those little hard things that around the contested footy, which the best teams, Richmond and Collingwood and West Coast, do so well.
A question for both of you. I mean, a lot of people have talked about on-field leadership, and some of the best teams over the past 10 or 15 years, the Hawks, the Cats, people rave about. And I think Brendan, even when we had him on the show last week, talked about how much he admired watching some of those teams and the leadership that the players showed toward each other and the direction and almost coaching that they gave. How important is that in the modern game? And in a year like this, where the quarters are shorter, the season is shorter, how big a role will that play?
And no runners. I think the runners are out like they were last year. So it's more and more important. I mean, already when you were coaching and you had to send out a runner, it was a 3 to 5 minute lag, and they'd get out, and then Jobe would have to tell the next guy and the next guy, and you might be 10 minutes before it happened, so it was difficult. But if you can't get runners out till goals are kicked, your senior players understanding the game plan and being able to direct players around as well as concentrate on their own game, and it's not just 2 or 3 senior players, it's 2 players per line potentially that can see, adjust and then manipulate the numbers around the ground, because more and more so it's not a full-back line, a centre line, a half-back line. It's numbers around the ball and where they're positioned on the field, and if you don't get those numbers right, then you can really be vulnerable at certain stages of the game. So I think senior players are more and more important, and I wouldn't be surprised if the teams with the better leadership groups and the more senior leadership groups have played together the longest are the ones that at the end of the year are very successful, because they just have an added advantage because of the lack of time that you can to put in the players at training. Because I still think you're only allowed to train one contested ball session a week, or one major. So you're still not training even the continuity you would in a normal season.
Yeah. I think that will be one of the best television parts of what happens with no crowds, is the content that the audience will hear from the players on the ground, because there's a lot that gets said, and now it will be crystal clear for the audience to be able to hear and listen to what players are saying to each other, and that content is stuff that is going to be new to the audience, and I think it's going to provide a wonderful insight as to what the players are thinking, what they say to each other when there's a mistake or when something good has happened, what they'd say when momentum changes against, like all these insights that you as a commentator or as a spectator, you're guessing at when you're watching the game, but now there's actually the content is going to be available. I think it's going to be wonderful.
One of the questions for you, Joe, you're commentating the Essendon game this week, and if you're commentating a game and you're at the ground, you can see the whole ground, and especially special comments, you're able to analyse what's going to happen and talk about off the ball. How are you going to commentate from your living room, or are you going to do it on your Zoom, or how are you going to do it?
We're doing it from the hub down in South Melbourne, so that's going to be one of the challenges. Is going to be you don't have this perspective of
so do you have a behind the goals camera?
You've got a behind the goals camera, but you've got the normal vision camera. But a lot of the time when you're standing there in the coach's box, you can see what's about to happen because you can see down the field and you know what is about to take place, and you know this is the other thing as well, like moves that need to be made in the coach's box are much easier to see at the ground, and so it's going to be interesting to be able to interpret. You are going to be guessing a little bit about what is it that they're seeing. The other part is the boundary riders can actually, with permission, they can actually sit anywhere in the stadium. So, Jude Bolton's going to be doing the boundary riding for the Swans game. He can go and sit behind the goals and view it from that viewpoint. And so that's going to be interesting to see the different perspective that they're getting as well.
I watched the game against Fremantle round 1 from behind the goals in a box. It was and it's sort of you can't help but in a normal game with the cut and thrust of the crowd, but get caught up in just ball following, just because of the way the game's unfolding, everything else like that, and the way the crowd's cheering, everything else like that. But when the thing I noticed about it, I had Hep in the box next to me, and he was giving enormous direction from the box, whether he's supposed to be doing that or not. Just the encouragement, the encouragement from Hurls to the rest of the back, because to your point before, you've got these different back line generals, and Hurls really played that role exceptionally well. The work off the ball, that a lot of you just don't notice in a normal game when you've got the fans there, and just the general encouragement. And Hep was doing a lot of that. Hurls was doing an enormous amount of that, particularly for the younger guys, Thatcher, those guys who, it's a big thing for them playing senior football. They haven't played an enormous amount of it. So, to your point, you will see a lot more of that. It's a good thing to see.
And so on that point, tickets for this week, how many tickets are Essendon getting for the Essendon-Sydney game? You'd be obviously, if there's 400 to go, there'd be 100 tickets Essendon supporters will be getting?
I haven't heard of the announcements yet from the New South Wales government around what this weekend might look like, but I'm sure Tom and the team up there at Sydney will be looking after the two sides. Obviously, it's a big game, first game back in the spirit of where we've all been and where we all want to go. I'm sure there'll be an Essendon contingent there.
Let's hope so. Let's hope those rumours aren't true.
Hey, we've got plenty of text messages coming through, so I should try and get to as many as I can now. And there's pages of them, and I think even if you think back to when we first started to where we are now, so many more messages are coming through every show. 0416 90 50 52 is the way to go about it if you want to ask a question. There will be times where I'll try and group questions together because there's just so many of them. So probably to you, Xavier, first, just the challenges as CEO of an AFL football club around membership, and how much time and energy and thought has gone into how you service the members when they can't actually go to the football, and what a challenge and a juggle that's been for you.
Yeah, it was really challenging early, but it was also something that the team embraced. And Justin Rodsky is our chief commercial officer. He's got a really strong, really skilled from a media perspective and digital perspective. And that was where we moved to straight away was digitally. How are we going to bring more unique insights, more behind the scenes footage around the club and around what we're doing, and being more transparent about so much of that. How are we going to do that for the fans? And even the whole concept of this show essentially sort of came from, all right, what else can we do to try and provide a connection to the club? So there's been a lot of that. I mean, I tell you, in terms of the membership and the pledge and the support of the members, I've been overwhelmed in seeing what that's looked like over the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks since we first launched that campaign. Without giving specific numbers, like the percentage of members that have completely pledged their membership for this year on the back of absolutely nothing in terms of being able to get the games and everything else, on zero guarantee around getting the games or anything else like that. It just shows you how much the football club means to so many. So I think you'll find even just the way we do business just generally as football clubs, but the way we try and find connections for the fans moving forward above and beyond just the traditional coming to games, which is always going to be such a critical element of a membership. You're going to see some really exciting products and experiences and everything else like that, and that's hopefully shows like this aren't you see a lot more of them moving forward as well.
Do you think, and this is direct questions from the members, just in regards to crowds, have you got any information at all about where it might be? And I know that's a little bit like asking you whether your name's Nostradamus, but you were pretty good with your prediction earlier on in episode 1, which we'll get to shortly, but where it might be in 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or is that just impossible?
Well, I see that there's a lot of talk about initially just sort of 300 or 400 a game, and it's sort of nice, but it's also a challenge. It's, in some respects, you just prefer let's jump straight to 10,000 or 15,000, so you can get lots of members into the games. And even I was talking to a corporate partner of ours today, a long-standing corporate partner, about how we're going to approach minimal numbers of around access to grounds, and he's like, well, we don't want access, get the members access. In part, that's why we get involved in the club, is because of the passion and the connection the members have with the club. And when we partner with Essendon, a big part of it is because you've got 85,000 members, and they're the lifeblood, they're the heartbeat of the football club. And I'd like to think in Victoria is probably going to be a state that's going to not quite move as quickly as perhaps the other states for obvious reasons, and we've still had a higher transmission than other states. I would think that it will probably be a month before we start to get crowds back into games, but I think that at that point there may be the ability, all things obviously remaining equal in terms of transmission, particularly community transmission over the next month. If we can still manage that and the curve is completely flattened, I think you'll find we can move really quickly into bigger numbers at matches, far quicker than what we would have all thought, and even to the point where you might get a final series that's not impacted at all with respect to crowd limits. And that's a long stretch, but it's something that if we can continue at this level, and the health experts believe it can be warranted, we could see that, and that's not out of reach. But a month ago, it probably did feel a long way out of reach.
Absolutely. We're live on Facebook as well, so on the Essendon Facebook page, it's like television. You can see the guys having a chat, and obviously, if you're just listening it through the app or through whatever way you're listening to it, send in some questions 0416 90 50 52, and we'll get some questions also that are actually coming up live on Facebook when we can. Over the course of the year, I'll go to you first, Joe. What was your favourite interview that we did?
I think that probably the Bruce McAvaney interview. I thought we weren't being diluted by having Xavier in the interviewing, so the content was higher. But I just Bruce is such a iconic person in Australian sport, and growing up listening to him call these just enormous events. Kathy Freeman's 400 metre gold medal win, and grand finals, and Melbourne Cups and things like that, and so for him to be as honest and open about his own challenges, how his time in the industry has changed him, what he's learned, the people that he's met. For me, that was a fantastic insight into a really iconic, highly respected, highly regarded person who just loves what he does, but also he's constantly trying to improve himself. And I took out of it was such a great lesson about you look at people and who you admire and who are successful, and their methodology is very simplistic. They're just trying to improve themselves all the time, and I took a lot out of it, and I thought that Hurdy, I sort of sat back and let Hurdy do most of the questioning, but I felt that Bruce was really open. It was a really great interview. I really enjoyed it.
Well, let's have a listen to a little bit of it. This is Bruce talking about the difficult time in his life when Seven actually lost the footy for that 5 or so years to Channel 9, and how the experience actually changed him.
But I feel like I became less selfish. When we got back into the footy, I do feel like I became a better team man, and I felt like I grew up a bit. I felt like I was less self-centred. Now, I'm being pretty honest and raw here. I haven't said this probably before to too many, but I felt like I was a more mature person, and I think having that 5 years away from the absolute most important thing that any broadcaster can do, I think, in this country, and that's to call AFL football on a regular basis. What an opportunity that is. And to have it, not have it for 5 years, and then, and during that time, I've had ups and downs at work. I've fallen out of favour a few times, but there have always been challenges, but I've always believed in my ability to keep working hard and to try and improve.
So that was Bruce talking about that time. As I said, they lost the footy there for a while, Channel 7. But I mean, he's so he gets quite vulnerable, doesn't he, when he talks? And it's really, he's very honest. And it's just Bruce actually broadcasting. You don't actually get to talk to him or hear him talk, and he's just, the passion comes through every time. He's
a great person to listen to, and he's so passionate about what he does, and you can feel how much he loves what he does. And I think it's a great. I learned a lot about someone that I really admired, and I felt that him showing some vulnerability was a great display for people who are listening.
So what's it like when you're in the commentary box with him?
Well, it feels like you're sort of sitting there watching TV, like as a young kid. You think that you sort of I'm being I guess transported to my youth and listening to Bruce calling Friday Night Football, the Kangaroos and Wayne Carey on Friday Night Footy, and so there's that nostalgia that I really enjoy, and I guess I've got to remind myself I got to say something interesting and talk at the same time.
What about you, Xavier? Of all the interviews that we did, there's a lot of them. You can have more than one. We'll sort of throw it around a bit. We've got a few to choose from. What stood out for you?
I mean, there was a couple. I mean, we spoke before about Zach and the leadership across the playing group and how important it is. And I enjoyed having seen and watched Zach's journey, over the last sort of 7 or 8 years, and seeing how far he's evolved personally, with his self-reflection, his self-awareness. Like, he's an incredibly impressive young man. Like, his willingness he wants to learn, his growth mindset, and just listening to him reflect on, not making the leadership group and how he's gone about it. That made me feel proud, and I was really impressed with him. And I know he's going to be, an even better leader for us this year after the experience.
Well, Hurdy asked him the question very early on in the piece. He just went bang and said straight up, how did it affect you, and was it going to have a potentially a positive impact going into season 2020? This is what he said.
Yeah, it hasn't really changed, I guess, my attitude towards still striving to be the best leader at Essendon, and still striving to be the captain of the club at some point in time. But, I think it was something that was a bit of a shock at the time. I guess fortunate enough to have a number of people around me that give me some good guidance and good feedback, and I think it's just gave me another chance to grow for myself, and I will continue to support Dyson and the other 4 leaders that are formalised in that group. But it hasn't really changed much from day to day training, and I think for me it's just about growing those relationships with players on and off the field, and I just guess being a good influence and a positive influence to keep improving the group moving forward.
Hurdy, you've mentioned this a couple of times over the last 10 weeks, and it's often said of Essendon about potentially the lack of leadership on the field, or it's an area that needs to improve for Essendon to take the next step. Where do you think where Essendon is at when it comes to the leaders on the field, not so much the leaders off the field?
Look, I think we're tracking really well. I mean, we've got quality individuals in the team, whether it be Michael Hurley down back, Carl Hooker, bringing in Dylan Shield, and Zach is definitely one of those. So I think we're tracking well. I just think we need a little bit more time to get that experience up there. Dyson obviously has shown a lot of leadership for his whole career, but you do need to see some reward for your effort as well. And I think if they can get some reward for their effort, I think that leadership will even grow further and further.
We've got 2 Essendon captains sitting here in the studio. To you, I'll start with you first, Hurdy. What to you is important to be a good leader of a football club?
I think first of all, authenticity and being your own person. That's a bit of a wishy-washy answer maybe, but you can't be a really good leader, I don't think, until you actually understand who you are and what drives you and how that impacts the group. And if you understand that, and that doesn't come naturally or doesn't come early, does it, Jobe? It takes a while to understand exactly how you influence the group positively and negatively. And then if you've got some good qualities about you, as most people have, and then you learn to express yourself and learn to talk and learn to care for, show that care for others, I think on top of the fact you've got to get a kick and you've got to play unselfishly and all those sort of things. But the biggest thing that I saw in myself, but then also young leaders coming through, is just being comfortable in themselves, and then how they affected the group with their actions. And once they understood that, it's not manipulation, but they could drive the group up or they could drive it down by the way they behaved.
Jobe?
Yeah, I think Hurdy's answered it really well. That self-awareness, and that's probably why I always think that someone in a leadership position is something that shouldn't be given too early. You're better off going too late than too early, just because I think you're right, Herdy. It is the most critical part is knowing, being really comfortable in yourself and that wisdom that you have of when to push and when to pull back, and that is what time gives you, and that is why I think the people who get thrust into roles of leadership, it can be really difficult, especially in a football club. Young captains are often weighed down by that because they haven't had the ability to really for self-discovery, and I think that is, and empathy is something that are really strong, really important qualities in a good leader and a good captain. And unfortunately, I think that you do get pushed into it too early.
Yeah, and I think the group around you makes a big difference. The fact that if you've got some older, experienced players who generally have been through the process, if you're a younger captain, and can understand you're going to make mistakes and let you make mistakes and guide you is really important as well. Young captain with a young coach and a young list is always very difficult because you don't get that guiding area to mould you. There are exceptions, but Jobe's right. You see a lot of leaders come into leadership as a group or as a captain, and they do fail, not because they're not going to be good leaders, but they're thrown in a bit too early, and perhaps they're burnt and they don't really back themselves after that.
Yeah, I think that it's something, like you look at it and your guy he's a high draft pick, so there's big expectations on him, and he plays well in his first couple of years, and all of a sudden he's expected to be a leader. That is something that it might not be suited to his personality, and I think that is you pigeonhole, and it's like we funnel people into what we want them to be, but not really who they are, and I think we miss the opportunity for people to really develop, and it means that we cut people down before they get the opportunity to really become who they are, and that path of self-discovery in football, it's very difficult because it's not an industry where you get an opportunity to really ask yourself, who am I, and who am I, and what do I enjoy? Because you get from school, you go straight into the industry, and you get told this is where you have to be, this is what you should look like, this is what you have to lift, this is what you have to run, this is the calendar, and then you go out and play. And these questions about who am I, what do I like, all this stuff about yourself is not really something that, while certainly from my own experience, it wasn't something that I really asked myself until really towards the end of my career. And I think that is one of the problems with the industry is that you don't have this cultivation of self, and you get pushed into and pigeonholed into things.
I think particularly with your generation and generations going forward, that's the case, because you don't have that outside world. When I first started, like players before me, you had jobs, you had a lot more time away from the club, you had other spheres of influence outside your family, your work life, your study life, and you're only at the club maybe 3-4 times a week for 3 or 4 hours at a time, whereas by the time you got there, it was a 7 or 8 hour a day job, and there wasn't any time for that extra sphere of influence to actually understand and become who you are. So there is an argument that players still spend too much time at the club. I'm sure it's a different argument from a club point of view. You're paying them a lot of money, the members want to see them there, but I've always been of the belief, believe it or not, Jobe, that players spend too much time at the club, and if you pull them back a bit, you may not have a lesser performance, and you probably have better people.
So how do you then apply that to coaching? So think about your experience as a senior. I know obviously a couple of those years are really challenging, but take it back to when you first stepped into the scene, because it's sort of I guess the comparison I'm listening to you talk about is like Ben Rutten's coming to be senior coach for the first time next year. He's having a really unique lead into it, obviously working with a very different coach to him, a really experienced coach. And we're trying to now build a framework around Ben for next year, because that's all our planning right now is for next year. That is going to best, support him to be the best coach he can be. And also to allow him to understand the areas that he can control and the areas that he can't. Because to your point before, Jobe, you talk about you can get caught up as a captain, trying to focus on so many different things. And then there's that is true, but there's only so many things you can actually control. Like, how did you find it, James? I
think firstly you're a lot older. Like, player comes in there 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. a coach normally doesn't coach for their 45. So you've got a little bit more experience on the world, and you've had different people influence you and different influences. So I think that's a little bit different.
You're late 30s though when you started,
yeah,
I think, and Ben's 36.
Yeah, but I also think there's a lot more to the job as a coach than as a player. You do. But in saying that, the balance, is not a great balance. Or certainly when I was coaching, it wasn't a great balance. It was pretty much get in at 6 or 7, and you might leave at 5 or 6, but you're back on the phone straight after dinner, and away you go. So, without creating headlines, I think that it's probably different now. I think that you need to find time away from that game to actually let your head distill your thoughts, let your head settle, and be able to actually coach properly and for an enduring amount of time. I mean, you see coaches 2-3 years they burn out because it's just all consuming. And you look at the NFL coaches, and I don't know a lot about the NFL coaches, but they are full on when they're coaching, right? They're 16, 17-hour days, but they only go from what's the season? 17 weeks, and there's probably a pre-season, and there's a bigger, sweet spot of time off there from what I've seen from the past. Whereas our season is very much goes for your season finishes, then you go into the draft, then you go into training, and you do see a lot of coaches now take a big chunk of that pre-season training off. I mean, Alistair Clarkson, Damien Hardwick, Nathan Buckley, I think all
Luke
have
Beveridge
considerable amount of time.
Yep.
Because when you're on, and you just need some time to actually clear your head and be a better coach, but also, more importantly, a better person.
So do you think that those guys who you mentioned in the football industry that are doing that now have had some level of success? Clarkson, obviously, a huge amount of success, but they're also, they have the wisdom to understand that what they were doing is unsustainable. So, Xavier, is it the responsibility of the administration then to push against the coach in the early years when he doesn't have the wisdom and say, no, this is not what we're not going to allow you to burn yourself out because you think it's the best thing. Our responsibility is to have you here because we know that longevity and consistency gives us the best opportunity to be successful as a club. So we're telling you this is what you have to do because it's for your own good. I mean, you're going to get pushback from senior coaches like that, but surely that is in part the responsibility of the administration. I
think that's right. I think agreeing the parameters with the coach, they're never going to be able to completely step out of it because it just doesn't work like that, and they won't want to. If based on the coaches I've worked with, and I think about John and Ben, and even just thinking over this period where they've just been stand down, like both of them were only a 0.2 or something like that, and that they're working 0.8 and particularly with Ben, he wants to continue to build the connection he has with his players. The education piece is critically important, but I think agreeing the parameters of right, what are the rules of engagement for you now to allow you to be the best you can be, and probably depends a little bit on the mindset of the coach. At the moment I've got two very, very different coaches. One is exceptionally experienced, part old school because he's gone through the 90s, the 2000s, and been very successful. And there's another coach who's his emotional intelligence, his awareness, he meditates, he does all these sorts of things. He's prepared to show a greater level of vulnerability than a lot of other people that I've seen in football, and that builds a different type of connection. Doesn't mean that one style is better than the other. Like that's why I think with the two of them this year, they're going to complement each other. They have already complemented each other exceptionally well, and they will continue over the next 16, 17, 18 weeks, however long the season is going to go for. I guess then the challenge is how do you then bring that support mechanism for a first year coach like a Ben. I think it's I believe like having the opportunity to have a succession plan in place is good business. You see it all the time in corporate business, and it's big business. I don't see why you can't make it work here. It's not ideal all the time because it's harder to structure. But in this circumstance, we've been able to do that. So, I definitely think we will sit down with Ben into the end of this year and sort of say, well, how are you feeling? Because it's going to be a big run. There's going to be a lot of incremental duties under his responsibility next year that he hasn't had this year. And a lot of it will be the stuff, the coaches just, if they had to rate in order of preference, I don't think the media sponsor appearances, all those sorts of things, as much as they respect them.
They were high on my.
I'm not sure.
They were high on my list as well as Jobe's. We love the sponsor and media.
But deep down, like the main relationship is the
players.
Players, exactly, and the fellow coaches.
Yeah, the coaches, and look, to me, that major relationship is with the players. And when things start to not unravel a little bit, that's when you start to try and work harder and spend more time. And I remember we basically, you didn't have a day off for probably 7 or 8 months, because the day off, the players' day off, was the only time you really had to go and then do your planning with the other coaches, because when the players were there, you wanted to spend as much time, if not formally talking to them about the game, informally just making sure there was a connection. And, sure, Jobe and I'd find a way to talk regularly, and it'd be quite, it wouldn't be too constructed, it'd be, quite informal. But there was guys that I didn't know very well who were, player 30 to 45, who I wouldn't watch play most weeks because, the reserves on at the same time, or you couldn't get there, that you had to really formally work hard to get to know, and that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I think your point about also it's when things aren't going that well, and there's points where they just won't go well, no matter who you are. 18 coaches this year, there'll be a point in time where something just doesn't go well, where there might be 2 weeks or 3 weeks in a row where it doesn't go well, and that's when you truly, right now, you just don't know how certain people will respond in certain circumstances like that.
The hardest thing I've thought about coaching is there's 44, 45 players, all with different personalities. You're a certain personality. How you have a relationship with all those, an authentic relationship, a really authentic relationship, and it doesn't take 6 months. It takes a long time to have an authentic relationship, and the fact that it's okay not to get on with every player. It's you don't have to like every player. They don't have to like you, as long as there is some sort of authentic relationship with respect, that within the boundaries of what you're trying to do, you work together to try and achieve it.
So when you went into it, you kind of knew, you would have through Sheeds and all that sort of, about how it turned him crazy, almost in a way, Sheeds, with how he went about it, and you would have seen a number of other coaches. Did you go in thinking, I'm not going to be like those coaches and do the 80 hours a week, but it just sort of takes hold, or did you kind of know when you signed up that that's what it was going to be?
No, I didn't sort of know what that. He didn't even know what the hours would be. I think I've been on record saying I didn't know what to do some days. You'd go to training and you'd watch training, you'd be standing there like a supporter watching training. Well, what am I meant to actually be doing? But the fundamental is you've got to have a love for footy, because you're just watching that much footy. So I've always watched a lot of football, really enjoyed it. So I didn't mind that side of it. But the thing that I think took a lot of getting used to was monitoring your levels on wins and losses and performances and bad quarters and bad training sessions. And if you got down every time a player had a bad training session, you can see why they get pretty cranky, because the players are sore, they're tired, they're up, they're down. And the biggest thing is walking. So players run out to play the game on a weekend, and you'd just be praying that they were on. That they would give. They're not because every player didn't want to give their all, but you just be praying that they'd be energetic and they'd give it all, because then you had a chance. But some days you'd watch your team run out, and you can't be up every week. And if 4 of your best players are down, well, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the great interviews was with Nathan Buckley, and he actually talked about not really having that full support of the players initially. And let's have a listen to what Nathan said for those that missed it, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
A bit more awareness of yourself first and foremost, and then a bit more confidence in yourself. And then I found you reach a point where you really don't care what other people think. And if you can get to that position, then you can truly be yourself. And that's pretty hard in the public forum, and I probably got to that point, late in 2017, where I realised that if I was going to go about it, I was going to go about it, transparently and authentically, and do it my way, I suppose, or be truer to myself. And I was very fortunate to get through that and be given another contract, and I can say that I've enjoyed my coaching and the involvement in football more in the last couple of years than I ever have, because I'm probably closer to my truer self. And the fact that the club has come along and we're winning a few more games definitely makes that easier.
So a question to both Jobe and Hurdy on that. Is there a moment where you just go, you know what, I don't care what people think, I'm just going to do it my way? Or does that just happen over time? So you as a captain, and also, I mean, the pressures that you went through were extraordinary, Jobe, as captain of the footy club, where you're almost like a big brother to all those younger players. So did that just emerge, or did there a moment where you go, you know what, I'm going to do it this way now, I'm going to do it my way?
Yeah, I think it's something that you develop and it becomes sort of with maturity and through experience, you know, and you experience good things and you experience bad things. I think that I certainly felt that, you know, I learned so much more about myself through moments of difficulty and through hardships, and that was more liberating going through that than. And that allowed me or propelled me to be more closer to who I actually really wanted to be, because I think the industry, and I certainly felt that there was expectations that you had to be behave a certain way and think and say a certain thing and talk a certain way, and I think it became suffocating, and I think it does suffocate people's real personalities. And I think the industry and the way, you know, like it's reported, or the way in which we talk about players, I think would be far better if we were allowed people to be who they actually were and feel comfortable who they were and present themselves as who they actually are, and not criticise them for that. And I think that you would get better quality interviews. I think you would get better quality content, because I do think that unless you get to a stage through experiences and maturity where you stop caring, then a lot of your formulative years, and when I'm saying formulative, I'm talking about, you know, from 18 to 30, you do care a lot about what people think, and you know, like, and you are very aware about what you say, and the industry, because you know criticism is coming if you say something that isn't how people want it to be said, or how it should be said according to, you know, the standards or what the expectations are, and so I think that for Bucks, for example, you know, like I made the comment to him in the interview. I said, like, you know, to me, Nathan, looking from externally, the person that I see now is someone who is just full of empathy and perspective. And had I been asked that question about you 10 years ago, those aren't the words or the ways in which I would describe you, because I think that he's learned through his maturity and experiences that this is who he wants to be, and he doesn't care about the expectations of other people. But it's a very difficult thing to do when you're trying to work out who you actually are, and through your teens and your 20s, you know, you're not supposed to know who you are. You're trying to discover it, and I think that's why we get you know, people who do feel constricted in the football world.
One of the themes that has come through, and I see that I'm in charge of the text messages, so I see them all every week, and a lot of them is talking about resilience, and everyone's had to show resilience through this COVID-19 period, and they refer back to how you got through and how you're able to captain a club through. What's it like when people are making comments about you and judging you who don't know you? What's it like? Did you take it personally? Did you ignore it and say, well, they don't know me, it doesn't matter? Has it affected you as a person when you look back on it? And has the time out of the game actually you the old Jobe again? I mean, I don't know how to quite ask the question, but...
I think it's a skill set. It's a skill set like anything else. You learn to develop the abilities to handle it, and initially it's very painful and it hurts. But the more you're exposed to it, the more resilient you become, and the more you learn about yourself and about what's important, and you seek advice and you seek help and you talk to other people who can give you that perspective and things like that. It's you know, like it is like any skill. You aren't just born with it. It's something that you train. It's like, you know, a football player. No one's born a great football player. It's a skill that they practice, and no one comes to the AFL. You get guys who are better quality, you know, have better athletes perhaps in their development, but everyone needs some more development. And for me, you know, like anything else, it was very difficult at the start. It became less difficult as I became more resilient to it and better at handling it. And I mean, you know, Hurdy, you you know what I'm talking about. It's a very difficult thing to be able to deal with, but it gets easier like anything else as you become more comfortable with who you are, and you're able to value the things that are really important to you, and that was something that I really learnt. And I all the experiences that I had in my time in football have turned me into the person that I am now, and for that I'm thankful. And I'm thankful for all the great things that happened, and I'm especially thankful for all the difficult things, because I learned so much more about myself, about people, about dealing with things through really difficult things, and for that it's a wonderful experience to have gone through, and I really am thankful for everything that I had, good and bad.
That's fascinating. We should ask you pretty much the same question. What's it like to be James Hird?
Well, I did get bullied last week for my red jumper. So I'm not sure if that went online. So Jobe can sit there on his high horse and talk about how hard it was, but he was quite able to throw it out last week. But look, I don't know. What's it like to be any person? You go your ups and downs, and
but just the scrutiny and even as a player, you were a superstar player that people would go to watch you play football, and the expectation was they're going there to see you entertain.
Yeah, and the interesting. Go back to a player. I never felt expectation from other people at all. I felt expectation from myself mostly, from my teammates and my coach. And listening to Nathan Buckley talk, and it's a little bit I have a different perspective than probably both of these guys. I did care what other people thought as a player, not necessarily supporters, not necessarily the media, but I really cared what my teammates thought and what my coach thought about my performance. Not whether I kicked 5 goals or what that sort of stuff. But for me, it was really important that we all felt like we put in together and we achieved together and we did things together. And when you let a teammate down, I remember one day we were playing Hawthorn, and it was 2000, and Mark Johnson was tagging Shane Crawford. And Sheeds had let me go in the centre bounce now and then. I said to Jono at the start of the game, I said, do you mind if I start on Crawf? I'll try and get one out on him, and then you can pick him up. And Jono said, no problem. Anyway, Crawf got the ball out of the middle. I wasn't manning up on him, got a handball, kicked the goal first 30 seconds of the game. And the look Jono gave me, Mark Johnson could give a spray at the best of times, but he didn't talk to me. It wasn't a spray, just a look of disappointment that I'd let him down. That's the sort of thing that I really cared about. So I actually did care what people thought about my performances, more so myself. Like, I really wanted to make sure I didn't let myself down. But it was interesting as a player, the tightness of that group we had. You really felt when you let your teammates down. So it's a slightly different perspective.
Yeah, because it's more about that thing of, as an Essendon supporter, if Essendon were 3 goals down, it's like, Hirdy will get us back in the game. Well, and then the scrutiny goes on you. That's this pressure that you're going to do it. I'm interested just in your mindset as a player living that. Did you feel that pressure, or did it just, do you grit your teeth and say, right, it's time to go now? Because that's what you did.
Yeah, there's often times I didn't do that as well, but the times I did do that, like the number of times, the few times I did do that, I really love that. That was the part that I loved, because Sheeds would actually give you that license to do it. Like, I was a midfielder who had to play forward. I just wanted to get in that centre square the whole time, my whole career. I just wanted to be playing there, and I was never allowed in there. So the times I was allowed in there, I made the most of it, because the centre square to me was that time you could go, okay, it's 3-on-3, or discount the ruckman, they don't do much. So 3-on-3, and that's the best time to get the ball, and you can actually create, you can do things and make space from there. So when the opportunity arose that a few minutes to go or you needed a goal, I sort of thought, well, yep, that's the time that I really wanted to play. And fundamentally, and probably similar to Jobe, being an Essendon supporter, I grew up just wanting Essendon to win. And you'd sit in the stands or you'd watch the TV, and when we lost, you'd be bloody upset. You'd cry, or you'd be, genuinely disappointed. So that always came through as a player, that I never wanted Essendon to lose. So it didn't matter if I played well or didn't play well up to a point, but if there's a point in the game where you could make a difference, then you want to make a difference.
Will you be the same, Jobe?
Well, yeah, I used to cry all the time when Essendon lost. But yeah, look, I did. I mean, funnily enough, the thing I enjoyed most about playing was the centre bounce as well, because it was the ability to create. And one of the most satisfaction I ever got on the ground was making the game easier for someone else.
Yep.
And that was, like how I used to think about it in my mindset with decision making and things like that.
Kick the ball, not hammer.
It's different when you're the coach. But that was what I really enjoyed. And I was a diehard supporter and so passionate about the team and when, especially when you're in a position of the leadership and that people are looking at you for guidance, you don't want to let them down. No. You want to do everything right by them. You want to do everything right on the field for them. You want to do everything right off the field for them. You want to guide. You want to help them in every facet of their of their time there. And one of the things that you want is you want everyone who came through the Essendon when you were there or you were in a position of leadership, you wanted them to walk away and have had a good experience, and maybe not the career that they wanted, maybe they didn't play the games that they wanted, but you wanted them to at least have had a good experience. And I think that's what I wanted as a captain, and I guess that's part of the responsibility of leadership. You have all these things that you want to do for other people, and that other people are relying on you to do it. And whether Hurdy was one of those guys who, when I was playing with him, you were a bit like the fan. Like when you needed something, you wanted him to do it, because you'd seen him do it in the past and you knew that he could do it, and it was, you became that fan, watching, and it was and that was a great part of playing with him, it was the ability to it almost transformed you into the person watching TV, but you're actually on the field with him.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when and Joe would be the same. As a supporter, when Essendon lost and you saw players smiling or shaking hands with the other team, you're like, "What the hell are you doing? What is going on here?" And as you played and you got old, you understood why you shook hands. It was sportsmanship, and you sort of had to put on a brave face and smile and whatever. But I tell you what, I think it was David Grenvold in about my third year pulled me aside and said, "Make sure you shake the opposition's hand. You look like a spoiled brat." And I said, "It's not that I don't like them. I'm just so disappointed." But that was the thing that you didn't want to lose, and that's why Sheeds used to always talk about, if you can find good players and the Essendon supporters, always pick them up, because it'll mean, not maybe it does or it doesn't, just mean that tiny bit more. But
Adrian's still doing that now.
Adrian Dodoro?
Yeah, he's still picking a lot of players that were Essendon supporters. It's still part of what he does. While we're talking about leadership, and I'm sure that if you're an Essendon fan listening to James and Jobe talk about that, that's pretty cool. So honest and so insightful. But Tim Payne also joined us, and he's an Essendon fan, and talked about coming into captaincy very late when it comes to the national team, but also try to shape a culture and turn the fortunes around of Australian cricket.
It was pretty obvious to me that the Australian cricket team, with the way they were going about it at times, was getting on the nose of our fans and of people who watch the game in this country. So, look, for me, it was about making sure that we started to drive the team culture again, where people were thinking first about the team. I thought at times there was, and again, this was only from, I was, as you guys were, as an external person, it looked to me that we'd sort of started to have a team that was just had some little fractions in it and little groups, and people were more worried about themselves and who was getting paid what and who had what sponsorship and who was the best player and who was what not, rather than how privileged and how important the Australian cricket team are as role models for people around this country, and the history that goes with playing in that team and wearing that baggy green cap. And so for me, South Africa was an extremely unfortunate moment, but again, looking back, a time to be able to reset and have a look at our values and why we want to play and why we do play and what's important to the Australian cricket team and how that looks to our fan and our public. So, it was an opportunity, I guess, to reset. But, I mean, my main message was that that everything we do now is about making sure the first decisions we make are about the team. We spoke a little bit publicly about wanting to make Australians proud again. and becoming better people. And I think that's something we not only spoke about, but we've walked the walk in the last couple of years. And I've certainly been really proud to be involved in it.
Tim Payne, the captain of Australian cricket, what an amazing story. He'll write a good book one day with what he's gone through. Herdy, we haven't asked you, of all the interviews we did, what was one that stood out to you, do you think?
Look, just to go back through, Tim Payne was exceptional. I thought, Jobe was saying in the break, the leadership and just the ability to come in and say what he said and call bullshit on the group, I think was pretty amazing. I thought Bucks was really impressive. Obviously love my old coach Sheeds, and Dave Reed gave something, an insight on the players. But for me, Tamika Williams, we talk about heroes and we talk about people who make a difference, and often footballers get thrown up in lights, but what the story she was talking through in ICU, and the fact that the level of uncertainty in her voice when she was talking about what was to come, and it probably didn't come what they were expecting, because I remember her saying that the worst is yet to come in that interview, and it probably didn't come for any of us. Thankfully it didn't come, but you could just sense that she was unsure if it was like America or like Italy or like the UK or like France, with the potential. But certainly a hero and an Essendon member, and I think to me that really, Essendon people on the front line talking about how much they love the club, but also how they're helping people. I think that encompassed the whole show.
Well, let's have a listen. I agree with you, and this is Tamika talking about the fact she was one of Essendon's, in a way, frontline volunteers, and talking about what it was like looking after coronavirus patients.
This is just another day on a bigger scale. All nurses, we can adapt really well. Anything, comes in at any time, and we just adapt to it. There's been a lot going on. I work in the intensive care unit at my hospital, and there's been a lot going on, especially behind the scenes. Here, there's been so many people creating protocols and sourcing protective equipment for us to keep us safe. There's so much going on every day. It's a massive team effort to manage this coronavirus. In all honesty, we haven't hit the worst yet. That's still to come. Luckily, we've been in a position to learn from the experiences from other countries. We're very responsive to what each day brings, and every day things change. For example, on one of my night shifts a few weeks ago, we pulled up the death toll, the live death toll that was happening in the US, and at the start of my shift, that was around 8,000 people had died from coronavirus. And at the end of my 10-hour shift, that number was up to 9,200. And that's sickening, to see that and hear that, and to know that that's happening, to people somewhere so far away. It's just horrible. For us here in Australia, the measures that Scott Morrison has popped in place and what all of our premiers have popped in place has done so much more than I think the general public can understand. These stage 3 restrictions are just helping minimise the risk. They've done such an amazing job, and everyone staying home is doing such an amazing job, preventing us from hitting our, the worst yet. So, everyone staying home is doing a great job.
That was Tamika Williams, an Essendon member, and certainly on the front line. Now, I reckon that was about late April, and the worry was always about May and what that was going to be. But fortunately, obviously, May wasn't as bad as what we all were dreading at the time, but very, very brave. Now, I wanted to play this, Xavier, and Andrew Welsh, and what he was able to do and what he continues to do in giving back to Essendon, particularly through the Back the Bomber campaign. Here is Andrew, and then Xavier will talk a little bit more, particularly to members out there listening to this, about what they can do and what I guess the footy club wants them to continue to do.
It's an environment at the moment that everyone needs an arm thrown around them somehow, whether it's financial support or it's an ear to talk to, or anything, any type of interaction. Is something that everyone needs. And I saw what Mick done is. One of the Mick Early, one of the gems of the world in with his empathy and he's helped support a family through, which is with their membership, which is really challenging. It was something that it resonated with me to think, I can provide. I look at the members that have cheered me and booed me, but they are part of what the great club is, and if there was some support there that I can help provide. In a small way to help the club, but help those people continue to feel like they are, part of the membership and contributing through this tough time. And it was something that I wanted to do, and it wasn't for recognition, or it's just it's just the environment and the place that wherever I can, however I can, within means, help out the footy club and those that do support it.
And the former number 12 of the Bombers, Xavier, giving back, and I guess a lot of the text messages coming through are talking about all the different sort of things that the footy club have come up with, ideas to help support members and give themselves the best chance to still be involved in the footy club. How's that all tracking, and is there any advice out there for Bomber fans?
Yeah, it's tracking really well. I was sort of referencing at the start of the show. It's sort of, it's such a unique year where ultimately we're sort of saying to any of the members, if it's a year unlike any other, you're not unlikely to be able to access a heap of games. Hopefully, it's looking more positive now, and we could see a lot more access than we probably thought it could be. But ultimately, we launched that campaign about a month ago now, 3 weeks ago, where we said to our fans, it's if you want to pledge your membership for the year, regardless of what happens, We'll give you a signed Guernsey of your choice, and the Anthony McDonald, Tip and Woody Guernsey. He's going to have. We might have to do that in the off season because I worry it might have an impact on his availability the week after if he does. I think we've had thousands of Guernseys taken up by the fans, so they've pledged their entire membership. So that means an enormous amount. There's others that have. The other option was if you want a credit for next year, and there's been a few take that up, and then there's also the refund because everyone's in a unique position. And we don't begrudge any option that any member chooses because this period of time has had significant impact on so many people. And if a member wants to get a refund, they'll still have their reserve seat next year. Their years of consecutive membership will still be maintained. But clearly, the more members that pledge, the more, I guess, it gives us a lesser reduction around debt, which is pretty important because we're going to have significant debt already because of the facility expansion that's on foot, and then we're halfway through. And, so far it's been just overwhelmingly positive. And, hopefully that continues. Equally, I said, they've all got different choices, members. The other aspect of it is the Back Our Bomber, which we launched with Welshie, and he's sort of referencing it earlier. We've had almost $50,000 donated to the Back Our Bomber, and that's essentially, so for anyone that's finding it really difficult, the club will, through all different supporters, through the board, through others that have put money into it, will pay for their membership this year. And I think that's an amazingly positive gesture and a well thought through gesture, and it's been so well supported. It's pretty heartwarming when you see those sorts of things happen.
From a supporter's point of view, and from all of us, everyone's really excited footy's back, and it's almost like we feel like we're over the hump and the job's been done, the players are going to get out and play, and whether you're not at the games, you can sit at home and yell and scream and part of it. But as a club, are we over the worst of it, or is there still potentially, what could go wrong, or what has to go right to make sure the club's in a financially stable position for the next 2 or 3 years?
The club's in a pretty good position financially with respect to not having to probably become an assisted AFL club, and that's we've spoken about that at length on this show. Like I was very reluctant for us to want to get to that point. I think the board was, because there was, rightly or wrongly, and either directly or indirectly, a lot of your decisions that you make, not compromise is the wrong word, but are overseen by a higher body that's not connected to the club, and that becomes challenging, I think, and I don't think any Essendon member would want it. I know when I mentioned it to you, you had a very strong view on where the club should get to, and I think we all sort of agree. We all agree. And we've invested heavily. Like we are, at the end of this year, we will have probably the best professional facility in the country, and you guys know, you've seen it in its existing frame. You add another $21 million expansion on top of that, of which we're halfway through it when COVID hit. It's going to have, we'll have the best women's facilities. We'll have dormitory accommodation for our Indigenous programs, our community programs, our partnership with Paralympics Australia. We'll have UVFL change rooms, community change rooms. We'll have an excellent sort of turnkey operation when it comes to our AFL program. We won't need to do anything for 10, 15, 20 years. We're going to be in an exceptional position, but the timing of COVID couldn't have been worse when it came to cash flows. And that's why when I talk about it, and it's hard because you're trying to balance the CEO, you're trying to balance the commerciality of the club and balancing the books and getting to a position where you're not continually going to members or high net worth for funding. But also the reality that your ownership position is such that you rely heavily on that on those groups anyway to help you get through. And for us, I guess it's unique because it was only 4 or 5 years ago that in 2016 the season wasn't a write-off, but the whole concept of what winning and losing of the season, it became a very different perspective around what success was going to look like that year. And we had such exceptional support from our members that year. So to then in less than 5 years be back in a position where we're asking our members to commit and buy in and look beyond and understand the bigger picture of the football club. We're back there again, and the support has been it's been incredible. And I don't think it's fair to talk about the percentages. Every other club's going to be no one really wants to probably talk as a trade-off about how many members are pledging and things like that. But I know ours is super, super high, and that just speaks to the loyalty and the passion of the fans. But we're in a pretty good position. I don't want us to stop investing in growth initiatives. I don't want us to just be a normal football club. I want to make sure we continue to evolve and innovate and think differently, because I think the goal of the executive and the board right now should be that if another pandemic or other disaster, be it financial, whatever, came about, we should be in a position where we are strong enough to survive that through an extended period of time because of the smart investments we've made, the less reliant on field performance necessarily, but that's still a critical element of our football club that we clearly know is number one priority when it comes to where Essendon's been and where we want to go. And that's got to be the determination that we all need to show to make sure we get Essendon to where we need to get to. So it's been overwhelmingly positive, and we're very, very thankful for it, and the members have been incredible.
How difficult has it been from a club perspective when you haven't got all your staff on board, trying to answer questions from members, trying to facilitate everything? Because I know that has been frustrating from a fan's point of view across all footy clubs. Yeah. But then that a juggle for you guys of, well, you don't have all the staff to be able to do everything.
I guess I'd say, because I heard you ask, have we seen the worst of it? As the CEO of the footy club, we haven't seen the worst of it, because unfortunately, I know there's going to be some permanent changes we're going to have to make as a business that are going to heavily impact our people. And I know it's through no fault of the people involved in the football club. And that's incredible. That's hard when you have to make those decisions. And, unfortunately, we're coming up to a position where, regardless of having games come back, regardless of the crowds piece, because we know it's not going to be material in the sense of every home games we're going to have a full audience and things like that. We know that television distribution is likely to be reduced. We know that football department is a good indication of what's likely to sort of be needed across the entire business to come out of this in a way that we can manage the debt level, and we're going to have significant debt because of the position we're in around our facility expansion. So the changes, the hard changes, the permanent changes are probably yet to come, and they're going to be really, really difficult because we've got great people at our football club, and we're thinking of all of them who are really frustrated and who have been in a position where they're just in a state of flux and sort of, I'm not languishing is the wrong word, but they're just out there wondering what's next. And
treading water.
It is not very much. Yeah. I mean, you've seen it. From managing the station, what that's like, and it's not easy, and it's in part it gets back to why we want to run this program. Why do we think about this? I mean, listening to Jobe and Hurdy, I remember the night where I had the two conversations with them both was, gee, it's going to be hard on people. How we're going to help them work through it, and that's essentially the working title came about. And hopefully in a small way we've been able to do that over the last 10 weeks, not just for our staff, our people, but for our fans, because every fan is impacted in a different way. Some can pledge and some can't. And this football club is not going to judge one bit around if you can or if you can't. We really respect it if you can, and it's amazing. But if you can't, we also respect that. And I think the program's been great, and I thank the boys for the involvement in the program. I thank you. I thank Joey. I thank everyone at RSN. Dave Barham's played an enormous part behind the scenes in helping us get to this point. Ben Corson, Justin Brodsky, Julian Trentino, Mark Bertieri, like all of you have helped us. We brought this together literally in 10 days. I think it was probably even less than that. And I think it's really served a purpose. And I know that a lot of fans would love for the program to keep going. It's just, in the reality, the boys are really busy. I know you spoke about getting Hurdy back involved. He was super surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised. Probably because I speak to him pretty regularly, but I also know how passionate he is about the football club. Like he was never going to say no to a concept that was going to help bridge the connection with the fans and the club during such a unique period. I didn't think that, and he essentially came up with the idea for this show in tandem with me. And Jobe was the same. He loves the fans. He always has loved the fans, and he's been such a central focus point for our football club and our connection with our fans. And it's not lost on anyone. So we're very lucky to be in the position we're in.
I think you need a black texter to give to Hurdy to sign some jumpers, because there's a lot of requests coming through for Anthony might be high up on the agenda, but I reckon Hurdy's might be a popular one too, based on the text messages coming
next
through.
Week we can do it for real. I can do it with real listeners and not just practice it. 10 weeks of practice.
I want to get to that. I want to get to that at the end. We're going to wrap it up in a moment, but is it good to be back doing something with Essendon?
Absolutely, yeah. It's been really enjoyable. I think to sit down and connect with the team here that have been doing it. But also, I don't know, just to talk about things that, reminisce a little bit, but talk about COVID, talk to the fans, listen to the fans. It's been really good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I'm not sure about you, Joe, but I think it has been an enjoyable experience. And I'm actually looking forward to watching the Bombers play again after this and sort of getting a little bit closer to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's like playing, isn't it? Like playing was the easy part. This has been the easy part, and to be able to the greatest joy that I had from playing was the ability to provide joy to other people, doing something that I loved, and that we always had the easy part of the equation, didn't we? Like we just got to play and we're just talking footy. It's the people who support the club and love the club and the passion that they have for it. They're the ones that go to the games every week. They're the ones that commit, financially commit for them. They commit their time. They commit their emotion. Like that's the hard thing about being a supporter. It takes all the effort, yet we get the adulation that we've done something over and above, when really we've done the easy part and the fans are doing the hard part. But it's been great to connect with you again and to connect over our shared love of the game and to be able to, in a small part, help and just talk footy and I'm the same. I'm really excited for the guys to get back out there and excited for them to be able to go out and play and know what that will mean to such a large audience and what that means to a lot of people.
And I think a big shout out, no, Xavier did it, but to Dave Barham, who has really put the show together and done all the work behind the scenes.
He's done all the work.
He has done all the work. Just told Jobe and I what to say this, and this, and you'll be right. But and thanks to everyone here at RSN too, Whitey, the team. I think you guys have certainly supported us. But from Dave sends numerous emails and Jobe reads 1 in every 10. But thank you, Dave, for listening.
And I think we should thank Coles as well, particularly with the vouchers that they gave away to a lot of our listeners. Coles Insurance, Amart, all those legendary moments that we reflected over the time. Who else would you like?
No, well, they're great partners, and we gave a Coles voucher away last week, and this is the spirit of the Essendon fan. I mean, we gave one to Mark. I can't remember, it was $250 or $500 voucher, and he ended up donating it back into the club to give it to someone who was in a less fortunate position than him. And that was part of the reason why we were running the show, was to try and find those people that were in greater need because of the impact of COVID. My colleagues next to me have gone and run out special deliveries at different times that no one will ever know about to fans in need that I think is really admirable and means an enormous amount to them, and it speaks to the spirit of the footy club and its connection with its members.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to be on behalf of all the Essendon fans and members out there, reflective of so many messages that have come through, is just to say thank you to you three. It's been a wonderful experience to be a very small part in all of this, but I know that so many Essendon fans have there's just been so much joy to just reflect back and listen to all the great stories, and to have Jobe and James back talking about Essendon in such a way is just, I think it's a really, really special thing. So particularly Hurdy and to Jobe, thank you. And I think also, again, on behalf of Essendon fans, Xavier, the openness, the transparency and the way that you speak to the fans is, I think, second to none. And I think Essendon fans should be really proud of the CEO that the club has got. And I think the three of you have, you've only got to go through and look at all the support that there's been through Facebook, through Twitter, through text messages. And I think the final number I'd like to be able to say is that there have been over 200,000 listens to the podcast in the last 10 weeks, which is a credit to the three of you, and a credit to the Essendon fans that have got behind something that the football club have put together. So thank you very much, boys.
Thank you. Good luck to John and the team on the weekend.
Absolutely. That's the most important thing now. You guys have done your job. Now it's over to them. And thank you. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. It's almost dark outside. We've got another 20 minutes overtime, but oh well, that's the way it goes. It was the final one, so we're always going to go a little bit longer. Enjoy the rest of your night, but more importantly, enjoy the footy on Sunday, and hopefully the Bombers can get the 4 points.